Guys, it's Wags from Ironman 4x4. We're back in my garage. I'm going to show you how to get the Ironman 4x4 ATS suspension installed. It's going to lift up your ride 2 inches. You can fit bigger wheels and tires. We're going to jump into it. Grab a few tools and a floor jack. This install is super fast. All right, first things first, get your car backed in. On these Subarus, some have an electronic parking brake. The Crosstreks have a manual one. Thank you, Subaru. Set your e-brake, pop your hood. I'm an ambi turner. You want to beat me in a walk-off? Turn left. All right, hood's up. It came from the factory this dirty, by the way. All right, for all you cheaters that are using a lift, yes, good for you. You're better than us. We get it. But we're in a garage. But if you're on a lift, pop your hood, keep it open, loosen these strut top bolts before you raise the car, because then you're just going to have to drop it back down. That's a pain. Also, see these little rubber caps? You want to reinstall these on the Ironman struts, because if you don't, this just holds a bunch of water and it turns into just a puddly mess of corrosion and ill repute. The one great opportunity about these Subarus is that they're mostly plastic. So all your skid plates, plastic. Be very careful if you're using floor jacks on where you jack up the vehicle from. So I found a piece of metal right here in this subframe cross member, faux cross member. So we're gonna jack right from there. Always use jack stands when you're lifting your car. You don't want to rely on your jack. If something goes wrong, you're going to get squished, wind up looking like a busted bag of beef stew on the ground. So take your jack stand, go underneath your driver's side and passenger side pinch weld, and set her down right there. All right, taking off wheels. If you've got an impact, jack the car up, take them off. If not, you need to take a breaker bar and break your lugs loose before you jack it up, or your wheels will spin and you'll never get them off. So I'm not going to lie, I put on a little bit of weight and I broke my Craftsman roller bench. So now I have Jerry, my knee pad. Jerry, short for geriatric pad. So put that down so I don't break my friggin' knees. Unhook your lines first, because if you chance it and leave them in there, you might unhook something, this thing droops out, you rip an ABS line, now you got to go to the dealership. So lines first. Grab a flathead screwdriver or a body clip removal tool if you have it. You're going to unhook your ABS line. That unclips from the strut. And then also there's another clip up here on the fender wall. You can get in here and pop that out too. See how? Now I got a bunch of extra slack. Don't forget to unhook your brake line. It's a 12 mil socket. Like that. And then for the time being, I take this and I just hand thread it back in so we don't lose it. And you can let that hang out of the way. Now we got to get the sway bar unhooked, and it has a hex in here that you can use, but if you put a 17 millimeter socket on here, it should spin off just fine. If you notice, if it starts to kind of spin or feel like it's stripped, stop, get a wrench, plug in a hex, do it the right way. When you go to unhook your sway bar, you want to unhook both sides at the same time. If they're connected, sometimes it's going to make it really, really difficult to remove it. So make it easy on yourself, unhook both sides. Now if you can't unhook both sides of your sway bar at the same time, there is a cheat. Loosen this one up, you can take a floor jack, put it underneath your sway bar, and then jack it up until this tension is released, then you can remove it. So when I get my sway bar loose, I just hand tighten the nut back on so I don't lose it. Another thing that's worth mentioning, when your sway bars are loose, these end links, don't tuck them up under something or get them in a funky position, because when you go to put the new suspension in, you'll get everything tightened down, you'll go to put your sway bar back in, and it'll be like your ABS line will be hooked around it funky, or this will be sitting outside of one of your tie rods. So just something to think about, but just on this Subaru, just push it back. It can rest up against the tie rod there, just like that. All right, children, so now we're at the part of the story where it gets real. The only thing holding this assembly together is the 2 lower camber bolts and the 3 strut top bolts up top. So we want to be really careful, because if we pull everything out too quick, this lower control arm and the spindle, it's all going to droop. And even though we've loosened up our lines and we should have a lot of slack, I just think it's the safest way. Take a bungee or some kind of a cord, or steal your dad's belt. If he's a fat guy, it works better. Just so that if this drops out, it doesn't overextend. There's a lot of plastic on these Subarus, so make sure you hook your bungee to something metal. I can hook to this ABS blank, stretch it around, and hook up here on your brake line bracket. Look at that. Grab yourself a 19mm socket, undo your top camber bolt. All right, make sure you don't forget the orientation of your bolts. The nuts go towards the front of the vehicle on the driver's side. So pull your nut and your washer off. If you push in on your brake rotor, it pulls right out. See how that's what they mean by eccentric. See how it has like a cam to it? So as you turn it, it pushes the top of the spindle in and out, and that's how they align your car. I put this back together so I don't forget, because the top bolt has a washer, the bottom one does not. All right, we'll undo the bottom. All right, that's off. And again, push in back and forth. You can just wiggle that bottom bolt out. There we go. And now our bungee is actually holding the entire spindle and lower control arm assembly. Grab a 14mm socket. We're going to undo all 3 of our strut top nuts. And like always, I leave the front one, which is the easiest one to get to. Leave that one tight and undo the back ones, which are hard. That one's already loose because I loosened it. Spin that off. Set it up there. Get in here. Spin that. That one's loose too. And the reason why I leave the front one tight is because it'll hold the coilover in place, and then you can just spin these 2 rear ones off. Makes life easier on you. Great, here we go. And then the only thing keeping this strut in here is just this top 14mm nut. Okay, so the other trick too is take your left hand or right hand, whatever, one of your hands, lift up. See how I can lift that up and down? I'm holding up. Spin that off. Set it there, and it all should be free. All right, come back down around here, and you can see as I pull the spindle away, I can just lower that down, and this should all come right out, which it did, like a glove. Cool. You rock it right out. Pretty straightforward. One thing, don't forget, if you're going to hang on to your OEM suspension, take your strut top nuts, spin them back on. So if you sell your OEM suspension to somebody, everything is there and ready for them. But keep the rubber cap. That is going to go on the Ironman suspension. All right, so get your Ironman 4x4 strut out of the box and ready to go. I've already pulled my strut top nuts off. I like to take these and stick them up here under the windshield wiper. That way I know where they are. The other really cool thing about these is I may or may not have jumped this Subaru 4 inches off the ground, and they just do awesome. They feel so good. They were engineered properly to put the piston right in that butter zone, so you're not gonna over droop them. No clanking sounds. Amazing suspension. So we've been really happy with it. But back to the show, we'll get it installed. So installation on these is just like removal, only in backwards. So you could just play the first half of this video in reverse and you'd probably know what you're doing. Set that one back in, just the way we took it out. There we go, rock it in. Get one in. With your left hand, hold it up. Take your right hand, grab the nut, go full on Stallone over the top. Spin that on. There you go, now you can let it hang. Come back down to the bottom. Bend the spindle over, line it up, And yeah, it takes a little bit of monkeying with, but there we go. You want to just, perfect. And then I use this top camber bolt. Spin that, get that jammed in there. Washer, nut, spin it down, finger tight. Then we will grab our lower bolt, which does not have an eccentric on it. All the adjustments done on this top bolt. Take that, bolt slides in right here. Spin the nut on. Cool. All right, now let's go back up top. All right, spin your other 2 strut top nuts down. All right, the OEM nuts were 14, but Ironman's one better, so we went with a 15 mil nut. So tighten the front one down. It'll draw the strut top up and in place into the perch. Get that one tight. The back ones we can just spin down. Awesome. Make sure you're torquing all these nuts back down to the factory spec. It's in your manual. So before we go any further, I just want to show you some adjustment settings for your alignment. On the factory strut, there's this little indentation mark that is literally at the 12 o'clock position. That's how they line up these little tick marks on this upper camber bolt so that they know where your alignment needs to be. Okay, so get this out of the way. So now that we know that that mark is in the 12 o'clock position, I'm going to show you a little trick. What you want to do is the most outside left mark on your camber bolt is right here. It's the last little raised tick mark on that camber bolt. So take yourself a 19 millimeter, wrench your socket, and what you want to do is you want to line that last mark straight up. That is almost a perfect alignment, and that's what we found. So you're still going to need to take your car in and have it aligned, but that will get you super close. So at least if you've got to wait till the weekend to get your car aligned, you're not just going to totally trash your tires. So now that we have our camber all aligned, throw a wrench on the front, socket on the back, and we'll tighten it down. I don't worry too much about the torque specs on this because we got to take it to get an alignment done anyways, and the shop, they'll torque it down. Just get it good and tight, G&T. So we can undo our bungee cord, or bungie, depending on what part of the universe you live in, and then it's just putting everything back together. So next we can do our sway bar. That plugs right back in. Spin that thing down. Grab a 17 wrench, 6 mil Allen. Spin that down until we get a little. Okay, that's one way of doing it, or I'll show you the fast way. All right, here's the fast way. Take your floor jack, jack it back up, get underneath the front of your sway bar, put a little tension, grab yourself a 17 millimeter deep dish socket, and give it the poop. All right, let's get the brake line hooked up. Grab yourself a 12 mil, and if you remember, like I do, I took that bolt in the OEM strut. So here we go. Make sure you hook this up right. So this goes underneath like that. See this awesome S-curve there? And it fits in just like that. Spin that down. There we go. Cool. All right, let's grab the ABS line, plug the top one in. Wow, that was hard. Plug the bottom one in. Unreal. You're done. When I clean my hands, regular fiber isn't good enough. It's got to be microfiber. I'm a high maintenance kind of person. I demand the most from my rags. All right, just that easy. Everything's in. Let's do a quick review. I always like to kind of just check, make sure we didn't forget anything. So we'll start with ABS. Both are plugged in on the ABS line. Our sway bar link is hooked back up to the back side of the strut. Top and bottom camber bolts are in. Top camber bolt is set to the almost dead nuts perfect alignment setting. You're welcome. Brake line is hooked back up. Let's check up top. We have 1, 2, and 3 strut top nuts. Those are all locked down and tightened. And last thing is, put that rubber strut top plug cap deal on so it doesn't fill up full of a bunch of rusty garbage in there. Then all we got to do is go to the passenger side, do the same thing. All right, with the front being done, now we got to get the rear installed. And there's a couple simple tricks I'm going to talk to you about. So for all you master mechanics that are high speed, just relax, because not everybody's done 1,000 of these installs. So your e-brake or your handbrake, when you set it on your car, it's only going to lock your rear tires. So when you lift the back of your vehicle, it can roll away. So you want to chock your front tires. So I got Count Chocula here. He's going to help me get the front all locked down. Awesome. All right, this part's easy. Pop the hatch. And let's get your mat pulled out. To access the rear strut top, we're going to need to remove this access panel. And you can either do it with a body clip removal tool, you can actually pop these pieces out that are foam, or you can just reach under here with your hand and just pull up on this outside edge and then push down on the sidewall. See? You know what? I didn't even break it this time. And same thing for the driver's side. There you go. And now you can see the strut top bolts for your rear strut. All right, I just jacked the rear up off of the rear diff. Get your jack stand set up here on the pinch weld. You can lower it back down. All right, let's get these wheels off. All right, first things first, let's get our ABS lines unhooked and then our brake line. We'll undo that bracket too. That way, when we go to lower the rear subframe, nothing's gonna stretch or break any of our wires or hoses. These you don't need to pop out with a body removal tool, but I will use it to pop these little clips back. And that literally just pops out, just like that. Now let's get this brake line bracket off. It's a 12mm socket. That pops off nice and easy. So with the Ironman 4x4 suspension lift for these Subarus, one thing you need to understand is that Subarus are a unibody vehicle, so they're not body on frame. So it's not just taller coilover struts that we're putting in these things to get the height. We also have to lower the rear sub-assembly. And to do that, we're going to use our sub-assembly hardware kit. So you might want to come back here on your plastic skid plates and pop a couple of the plastic clips or pull some of these 12mm bolts down. You don't have to pull the entire skid plate off, but just undo the back part. It'll give you enough room to flex them down. Makes it really easy. Now, even though that the car's up on jack stands, you want to use a floor jack to support the rear subframe. And to do that, you can just put your jack or your transmission jack, if you've got your car up on a lift, underneath the rear differential. Okay, so I've lowered the first of our 4 subassembly frame bolts. These long bolts here will keep the entire subassembly attached to the unibody. So loosen them up, but let them hang. Don't take them all the way out, because we'll lower the jack down when we go to push it down the 2 inches to put the subassembly frame spacers in. Then we'll move on to our next one. Okay, same thing over here in the front. We've got that guy lowered. We'll do the 2 over on the passenger side. If you're working on a Subaru Outback, there is one main difference on the back end of the vehicle. You'll notice here that the rear sway bar sits behind the rear axle as opposed to the front. The Crosstreks and the Foresters put their rear sway bar in front of the rear axle. So that's why you need these little crush tubes right there. and we include 4 of them. Now, depending on what trim level of Outback you're working on, you could use 4 or 2. So just, you'll see here on this sway bar support, ours just uses 2, and they fit right in there. And you take this bolt, it's a 16 mil wrench to get it in there, or socket. We'll spin one up in there, and then we have another one on the other side. Some models require one here, one there, and one on the other end. This Subaru's brand new from the factory. It's never been off-road, not even once. All right, the next move is to take out these 2 bolts here. This front subassembly frame has a bracket piece here, so this needs to space down also. If you want, you can pull this bolt out that's holding our skid plate, but I leave it in because I just push this back, it pops right out, undo them, everything will bend right down, not a problem. Fits right up in here. Throw a little Loctite on the bolts. Come on. There you go. Cool. All right, these are 16. Look at all that dust. I swear it came from the factory that way. Okay, now we're going to lower down our subframe assembly. So make sure you really nice and easy lowering your jack down. I've seen a lot of really cruddy jacks that you barely go to loosen them and the whole thing falls. So see how that spacer's coming down? And that's about as far as you want. All right, now we can put our Ironman 4x4 spacer right in there. Man, that thing looks cool. And leave it loose. Get that bolt in there and start to thread it in finger tight. We don't want to cross thread it, so sometimes you kind of have to move this around a little bit to get it to set. There it goes. All right. I'll just tighten it up just a little bit. Okay. And we can do the rear. All right, now we can do the back one. And one thing that I thought was a little confusing is when you pull this bolt out, don't forget this washer is cupped down. So when you put it back together, and the exhaust is here close, set the washer here, then put the bolt in, then grab your Ironman 4x4 spacer, set that in there like that, and then you can kind of finger tighten it. All right, and I like to position mine so you can see the Ironman logo there. That way all the kids at the Subaru rallies know how serious you are. Lock it down. All right, we'll lock our front one down. Sweet. And then we just have to tighten the 2 on the other side. Next thing we need to do is address the rear sway bar. And to do that, since everything's being lowered down 2 inches, your sway bar is not going to be in the right position unless it gets moved down too. So Ironman 4x4 made these totally sweet 12/16K rear sway bar spacer brackets. And you are going to need these for your Crosstrek and your Forester. The Outback uses a different setup. So let's get our hardware out and I'll show you guys how to put these together. All right. So first of all, grab a 5mm hex drive. Grab yourself some red Loctite. I'm using red because this is not coming apart. There we go. A little red right there. And then what you want to do is underneath, you're going to take these countersunk Allens and spin them in. And I'm just going to use my gun to speed things up. Okay, there's one. I like nice things, I can't help it. Okay, so that's on there. Let's switch over. If you need to put these in a vise, you can, but honestly, if you just torque them down by hand, Just turn them until they stop. The big thing is you just want to strip that out. And the idea here is these are like threaded studs that we're putting in, so that when you're done, that should be completely flush. Make sure that you keep your Ironman 4x4 hardware together and separate from your OEM hardware. These nuts that come included have a flange with serrations on the bottom. Those, just spin them on the studs right there so you don't get them confused. Not that I've ever taken everything off together, put it in a big pile, and then not known how to put it back. So you're smarter than me. But you can see these nuts here on the stock bracket are very similar to these. So keep your Subaru hardware on your Subaru parts and your Ironman hardware on your Ironman parts. All right, now we got to get our stock sway bar bracket off, and those are both 12 mil nuts. The easiest way I found to get to them, take several long extensions, put them together, get at it from underneath, go in front of the rear control arm at an angle. There you go, lock it down. Nice and easy, and do not lose these nuts. All right, same thing up here. Now all we've got to do is pop this bracket off, set it down like that, and our sway bar pops off. Now we got to get our sway bar unhooked. So grab a 14, spin that guy off, unhook it, sway bar drops out. Now we have access to put our bracket in. All right, now we'll take our Ironman bracket. It's got down with its arrow, so you know you can't get it wrong. And what we're gonna do is hook it just like that. And then we will grab our Subaru hardware. And I start with the top because it's easier to get to. And then we'll get the bottom one put on. All right, line your sway bar up, get the bracket put back on. And that tucks in like that. Grab our Ironman hardware because it's going on Ironman threaded studs. This is a 13 mil socket to tighten that down. Don't try to hook your sway bar in link up yet. You can see it's 2 inches lower. We need to remove the strut first. Once everything's hanging down where it should be, we'll do this last. All right, we're getting close. Now we can pull the rear strut out. It's a 17 mil wrench on the front, 17 mil socket on the back. Take that out like that. A lot of guys want to always pull the control arm off at the spindle. But my buddy, who's a Subaru tech, showed me this trick. If you actually pull the inside of the control arm down, it almost creates like a fulcrum. So when you go to put it back in, you don't need to use a jack or anything. You can pretty much just muscle it back into place. Works really good. Bolts out. All right, now we're back up on the top side of the strut. We're going to undo our strut top nuts. It's a 14 millimeter. Spin right on. So everything's down and hanging. Pop that bolt out. And the strut slides right out. All right, now that the strut's out, we can actually push this down and get our sway bar end link back in. Very cool. And that's a 14 mil nut. All right, I've got our rear Ironman 4x4 strut for the Subaru. So what we're gonna do is fit it into the lower control arm, like so. spin the nut on finger tight. Remember, we don't lock down suspension bolts until the car's back on the ground. Then you can line up the holes on the strut top up above, grab a buddy or something to brace that in there like a hammer. Sweet. Up top, take your strut top nuts, spin them on. Like I mentioned earlier, instead of pulling the lower control arm off out at the spindle, doing it inboard at the cross member just makes it so much easier because you have all this leverage. So even though the strut's pushing down on you, you can muscle this into place fairly easy. All right, now we just got to get our brake line extension bracket fitted, and I'll tell you why we've included this brake line extension bracket. If you look at your brake line here, that was your normal resting position, but we have lowered the subframe and raised the vehicle up 2 inches. So if you left it back in its stock position, see how that's kinking there? It's not fully kinking, but it's not good. We want nice, big, wide bins if we can get them. So unscrew our stock bolt. The bracket looks like that. You're going to put it in here like this, with the bend facing towards the back of the vehicle. See, it's got that little break there. And then we will take the Ironman hardware, which is a 13 mil. Spin that baby down. Make sure you use red Loctite on all of these fasteners, and I'll tell you why. Because once we get this fitted, so see, that extended it up. We've got a nice wide bend there. It's not tight. Now your rear spindle, this is all going to flex up and down, but you're going to have plenty of movement here, because at full droop, this is as tight as that's ever going to get. It's only going to, go higher as your suspension compresses. So back to this. Why do we use red Loctite? Well, I recommend people actually turn this bracket in just a little bit, because if you're running aftermarket wheels and tires, depending on your wheel, the dish, the offset, all that, this here can get really, really close to that inside of your wheel. So what you want to do is, once you get aftermarket wheels and tires fitted, look up under here and make sure you have enough clearance. Because if this was even just to rub up against your wheel all day long, this is going to get burning hot. It'll boil your brakes. Or it could get so hot, if it touches, it could wear through something. If it touches here, the whole line could blow. And that would be BAD bad. All right, that's done. Clip our ABS line back in, ABS wire back in. Just snaps right in. So now that we've lowered the rear subframe down 2 inches and raised the vehicle 2 inches, one thing that doesn't change is your exhaust. So to fix that, we need to add on the Ironman 4x4 IEXH 4075 rubber exhaust hangers. Now what's awesome about these things, let me get it opened up here, is that they're actually adjustable. So if you have high performance exhaust that you want to add on, these will save you a bunch of time. So you have 3 different adjustment settings. On the Crosstrek, I run the longest one just because then you don't put any of your, it keeps all your exhaust far away from the cross members. You need to replace 3 of these. So pull the one on your right hand side of your muffler, and there's 2 on your left hand side. There's also a rubber hanger up close near your cross member by your differential. That one can stay. These guys can be kind of a pain to get on, so you just have to wrestle them on. I install them like this. Just kind of got to mash them, wiggle them around, mash them on, and the same thing up on the top side. Make sure they clip over. Boom, done. Do the 2 on the other side, you're done. Now we just got to get everything put back in the trunk. So these access panels, they plug in from the top, and you snap them into place. This foam piece with your tools, if it popped out, it just snaps right back in. Sits like that. Trunk Matthew. Sweet. Don't forget to button up your skid plates. Remember earlier when I told you not to tighten anything down with a bushing in it until the car's back on the ground? That's because bushings are like if you squeezed your finger and started twisting. You can't really twist your finger very far until it really starts to hurt. And it's the same thing. If you tighten these bushings down while the car's suspension is drooped in the air, once you drop it, it just twists and cranks the trash out of that poor bushing, and it will prematurely fail on you. So what you want to do, get the car on the ground, torque it down when it's under its natural ride height. Then you won't prematurely wear out your bushings. Make sense? I thought it would. We'll grab a 17 here, a 17 here, tighten that one down, tighten this guy down too. Last step, if you have a torque wrench, these Subarus say torque the lugs down to 80 foot-pounds. And so you want to torque them in a star pattern. And once you get them all torqued in the star pattern, and then we'll finish with going around the world. And that is pretty much it. So even though you're done, there's still a couple things you need to do. One is you need to get your car in for an alignment, and you need a 4-wheel alignment. Also, take your Ironman 4x4 instructions that came in your kit, and if you lost them, that's fine. Go to our website, Ironman4x4America.com. Go to your kit, and if you scroll down, there's going to be a PDF with your instructions. At the end of those instructions are some specific instructions for your alignment tech. There is a certain way these cars need to be aligned. It's easy, and they're pretty much set where they need to be, but have your tech follow those instructions. It'll save you a lot of time. Also, run your car for about 2 weeks or 300 miles, come back, crawl underneath, recheck everything. You want to retorque your nuts, and when you torque nuts down, back off a quarter turn, then lock it down to the torque spec. I hope this was easy for you guys. You know, we've worked on all kinds of different vehicles, but it's really cool that we've got into some unibody vehicles like these Subarus. They're really, really easy to work on and fun, and I seriously think anybody with a few tools, what did I use, like 7 tools, can get this done in their garage. If you have any other questions, check us out on all of our social medias or Ironman4x4America.com.